All all right, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up to day two. And this was said really eloquently in my last meeting today, where the presenter said, you're being present, so allow yourself to really be present. And I think that was a really lovely way of saying, like, we're here now, we're dedicating the next 2 hours, if possible, to minimize all distractions. If you know, if you're, I know a lot of us are multitasking, but if possible, if you can, if you have the option to really just hone in and listen in today and not multitask, it will be really beneficial. Secondly, to Kay's point, yes, I do get a bit lonely talking to a bunch of black screens. Albeit I understand people are doing lots of things at once, but I would love to see some lovely faces that I'm talking to on this Friday. It's been a relatively nice morning in Melbourne, where I'm based at the moment, so it'd be nice to close out my day talking to some human faces. But welcome to workshop two, where we're going to go through the process of what we like to call discover. So in the sort of timeline of where things are and what we've got planned, you are now in discover. We then have a 2-week 2-week break, which I'll sort of explain a bit more as to why we have that time before we meet again for workshop 3, being define, then ideation, pitching ideas, influencing change, prototyping, pitch practice. I've made a mistake for workshop 9, and a showcase and your dry run, and then your virtual showcase. So it's sort of at the beginning of our journey here. So I know that looks like a lot of workshops upcoming and a bit overwhelming, but don't worry, we're all in this together, and it'll go very quickly. So you guys are familiar with this double diamond, which I briefly went through yesterday, sort of articulating the design thinking process. So we're about to embark on that first part of the first diamond today, this research discovery phase. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what this entails and the importance of this stage, because it influences every part of the subsequent stages. One thing about this model I would like to articulate that I didn't quite stress yesterday is this model is not linear in its nature. As you can see from these circles here, it is iterative. So what that means is you might do some research and develop some insights, which then you go and test. But you might not get the results that you're after, or you might need to go back to the drawing board to explore certain parts of the concept further, or what you're trying to understand a bit further. So please don't be discouraged if you find yourself going through a cycle of going back to researching or evaluating your data or testing your concepts or solutions multiple times. That is all part of the process, and it's not designed to be a linear where you go from sort of ideas and research to concept, and then you test your idea and then scale and deliver. It's very much a continuous improvement kind of model. So today we're going to look into sort of the innovation mindset. So following some of the frameworks and approaches for innovation that we touched on yesterday. We're then going to go look at, which is part of the approaches to innovation. Then we're going to look into what is empathy and how do we conduct this research that we're going to do in this research phase of the project, of the program. Sorry. So I've talked a lot about human-centered design. Yesterday we looked at some models for innovation, and I kind of talked about the different frameworks and methodologies that exist to approaching innovation, but why human-centered design, and are there any limitations? Well, there's human-centered design, and this is different to what's known as country-centered design. So designing for the needs and wants of people is widely regarded as fundamental in contemporary design and planning. A lot of these methodologies and frameworks stress the importance of focusing on the user. However, in appreciating an Indigenous or Aboriginal worldview, this suggests that there are limitations imposed by only looking at humans or having a human-centered approach to design. And what I mean by that is, if people and their needs are at the center of the design considerations, then aspects like landscape and nature are reduced only to second-order priorities. And if design and planning processes are considered natural systems that include people, animals, resources, and plants equally, similar to an Aboriginal worldview, this could make a significant contribution to a more sustainable world. So I just wanted to leave that as food for thought when you're kind of going through your challenges, that yes, users are important, but there are other considerations that might be pertinent to your problem that weigh just as much in the considerations of how you guys address your challenges. So we touched on some of the frameworks for innovation, but I wanted to touch on some of the mindsets and culture that are just as important when we start investigating or researching or dabbling in this space of like discovery or just wanting to embark and do something differently. So the mindsets that help embrace and sort of foster an innovative culture or an innovative way of working are things like creative confidence, curiosity, having empathy, which we'll kind of dig in deeper today, ambiguity. A big part of the work that I do sitting in the D-Lab team and as part of Smart Seeds and K is it deals with a lot of ambiguity when you're sort of going through the data, particularly during the discovery phase, when you're trying to understand what's going on and the nature of the challenge. This can sometimes be a bit ambiguous and not so crystal clear as perhaps problem solving in another sense, in another space. Challenging assumptions, a make it mindset, failure, resilience, optimism, and iteration. And I think one of these things that I really want to stress is failure is not a bad thing. It simply means in the context of design thinking or sort of going through this process, if one thing doesn't work, then we pivot and we try something else. In no means is failure a dirty word or it's almost a problem in the process of this process if you don't fail, because it means that potentially you're being too safe or not taking enough risks. So, if one angle doesn't work or your research doesn't affirm your original assumptions, that's okay. This is what the process is for. It's to test assumptions and for you to continuously iterate and challenge based on the data you find. So some important behaviors that will help you as you embark on your discovery phase of this program and just the program overall is deferring judgment. So I touched on this yesterday when we were talking about team collaboration and ways of working and how we're all going to be working together. And some of you may not know. Sorry, I just saw the comment. Can you describe it, what is meant by a make it mindset? Sure, Crystal. By make it mindset, we mean by like prototyping. So, or by just making something as in like, how do I explain this? You just give it a go, or you might want to prototype it and it's not particularly perfect. It's just testing a concept and just making it, if that makes sense. So deferring judgment, as I mentioned, there are no bad ideas. You're not casting judgment. You're being more open and letting people contribute their ideas. Going for quantity. So particularly in the ideation phase, or just as you go through this process, it can be quite easy to judge your own ideas, or you might have reservations to contributing because you might not think it is the best quality of idea, or perhaps a fear of judgment, like the first point. But go for quantity. It's in this process, it's best to get as many ideas as possible on the table and then start to use that sort of more critical thinking as to narrowing down. That way you're not inhibiting yourself or your other team members. You just sort of, it's a natural flow or stream of consciousness of ideas, which you can then start to review with a more critical lens once it's all out. Building on the ideas of others, very self-explanatory. Someone might contribute an idea, which then you build off of collectively to come to reach a particular decision or make a judgment call, or as you're navigating through concepts or analysis. encourage wild ideas. So pretty self-explanatory. Sky's the limit. Don't be afraid to think outside the box, as cheesy as that may sound. Be visual. So sometimes, and we do this a lot too in the work that we do, is sometimes a picture can tell 1,000 words. It can be easier to illustrate something as opposed to write heavy text. And one conversation at a time. So that one's fairly self-explanatory. I might pause there. Does anyone have any questions at all, or is this all clear or making sense? I'm taking silence as everything is clear. It is a two-way dialogue. As much as I love hearing the sound of my own voice, I don't want to hear it for like 24 hours as we go through the multiple workshops that we have. So if you guys have examples of this, or you want to jump off mute to make any contributions or thoughts or ideas, please feel free to do so. It's definitely a two-way street and a conversational sort of informal session. So research methods for design thinking. So this is a very simplified process, and the process that you guys will take as you embark going through Smart Seeds. So the first step is empathy interviews, so actively listening, and we'll delve into sort of what constitutes as active listening in the subsequent slides. But essentially, as the slide indicates, it's the time where you take to interview someone or ask someone questions and listen to what they say, listen to what they have to say in response. So capturing data and creating insights. So once you've gone out and interviewed a bunch of people, you've gone and asked them questions that are relevant to what you're trying to explore, you'll have a whole bunch of data. So this process is the process of reviewing and sifting your data to create what's called an insight. And we're going to explore what an insight is and what makes an insight unique as the workshops go on. But essentially, at the crux of an insight is essentially a actionable statement that really is the non-obvious golden nugget of your data. So when you're sifting through your information, you'll find what are known as themes and patterns. But when you dig a bit deeper under the layer of the obvious themes and patterns, what is this data really trying to say? What are some of the really non-obvious things that is this data indicating to? I guess an example of this, or I guess a way of me trying to indicate this, is I could catch a cold and you could be interviewing me on, okay, so you got sick, and it could be about cough and cold medication. And it's like, okay, well, tell me about your week. It's like, well, I felt sick and I've caught a cold, so I've come here to grab this medication. But it's like, why have I got sick? And if I dig deeper, and if I dug deeper to uncover why it is or how I got sick, it could be that sleeping is not a priority. Why is not sleeping a priority? If I go down a layer, it's like, because I don't prioritize my health. Okay, why don't I prioritize my health? Because I value corporate identity and making a good impression over my own health, or something like this. So as you dig down deeper and you challenge assumptions and gather your data, you'll start to uncover these kinds of insights. Then step 3, value proposition and user-centered problems. So from this data and the insights that you gather, you'll start to develop what are known as challenge statements. So once you've developed these insights, you'll come up with a series of questions that you use to go out and ideate. And what ideation is a way of answering, it's kind of like discovery, in the sense that you're using your challenge, the insights that you've created, to go out and test and a bit of a mind blank this afternoon. Go out and test and almost come up with ideas in response to your challenges. So backtracking a little bit as to what empathy is, we have this video from a woman named Brene Brown. She's very popular at the moment, and she's done a lot of work in sort of empathy and the emotional responses that people have to different situations. So I'm just going to play a little video for you guys. I'm just going to reshare my screen to make sure that it shares sound. So just bear with me one moment. Let me know in the comments if you guys have trouble hearing.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
It's a very short video, but it's a very insightful video. The first time I watched it, I realized how much unconsciously you can say at least in response to someone's problem or situation. Why I've shown this video in particular to you is pertinent to the discovery phase, because the discovery is all about gathering your research, which is exactly what you guys are going to do over the break between lab workshop 2 today and when we see you in workshop 3 in 2 weeks time. This break is given intentionally for you guys to go out and conduct your research. And how we're going to do that, we're going to delve a bit deeper in this workshop today. But following on from Brene Brown's video, why do we empathize? So empathy helps create better relationships. It helps build empathy and trust. And this is imperative when you're conducting a user interview or running your research. Yes, you do not have that much time with the person to ask questions. It could be over the course of an hour or half an hour. And within that time, you have to build a sense of trust and rapport, depending on your challenge. statements, excuse me, sore throat, depending on your challenge statements, there could be a series of vulnerabilities or sort of sensitive information that people disclose. And so how do you sort of build that connection speedily so that you get the information you need, but at the same time, you're not disrespecting or sounding like a machine? And it seems like a very easy skill, but it's quite difficult to do properly, and it enables us to recognize and understand the emotions of others in a respectful manner. So the discovery phase, I've sort of spoken briefly about the fact that you guys will be conducting some user research. So this notion of active listening. So what does that look like, or how does that work when you guys go out and speak to people? So one is actually listening, and this is quite difficult, particularly after you've done a couple of interviews and you've started to build a pattern in your mind subconsciously about the information or what they're going to say. Subconsciously, themes will start to percolate at the back of your head when you're asking a question, because it's maybe the fifth time you're hearing the similar answer or a similar response. Actively listening means that I like to think of it as you treat every interview like your first interview. You go in as an empty sponge and assume absolutely nothing. To my point previously, making them feel safe. So this notion of psychological safety and ensuring that the participant knows that, it's voluntary consent. You can end this at any time, and they just feel like they're in a place where they can be open and honest without any judgment, which is the third thing there. And avoiding defining the problem. So in the case of this, making sure that the questions aren't yes, no responses, or there's an answer sort of hidden within the question that you're asking that you kind of want to confirm or deny. It's about open questioning and letting the participant make those decisions themselves to tell you the answer that's really from, it's an authentic answer as opposed to a response that you want to hear. And questioning guidelines. So being curious. So this is when the 5 whys are kind of really useful. So, why, what, where, how, 5 whys in a page. Yeah. Sort of asking questions like what, where, could you provide an example? Could you explain this a bit deeper? That goes to the point of digging deeper. So if there's something that you want to know, don't be afraid to get the participant to sort of articulate that on a bit deeper note, or to provide more examples. This generally helps the interviewer get more context. So assume nothing, as I mentioned previously. As you conduct more and more interviews, it can be easy to start making assumptions and go on the journey. So 9 out of 10 times for me personally, you'll have a script of questions that you're going to ask. However, the nature of the interview might not go in the same order that you've scripted, and that's okay. Just sort of keeping a mental note of where you are in the process and making sure you ask the questions that you need to ask, but it might not necessarily go in the order that you've assumed. So I touched on this aspect of insights previously, but what makes a good insight? So good insights are those that are authentic, they're non-obvious, and they're revealing. So what does that mean? So an insight informs, it sheds lights on the needs and wants of customers. So that's why you're collecting this data. But when I said this kind of golden nugget and sort of that deeper layer of understanding, this is when the points memorable and inspire sort of resonate a bit more. It has that stickiness to it that is actionable. So an insight will make you want to do something about the challenge that it's talking about. So it'll make it stick with you and it's easy to share back and it's easy to remember. That's what I sort of mean by that stickiness. And it will motivate you to do something so that there's an inspiring piece to it. And don't worry, there are formulas and ways in which you can go about creating an insight. So we will be sharing that with you guys too across the workshops. So we shared a mural link with you guys yesterday to your home boards with your teams. So I'm going to ask you guys to have that up with you on either Google Chrome or Microsoft Mozilla Firefox at the moment. And it should, we are now in the discover part of the board. So I might give everyone a moment to hover on to their boards and zoom into the discover part. Just bear with me, guys. I'm having some technical difficulties. Things are just taking their time to load. But just while we're waiting for everyone to get to their boards, now that we've sort of gone through what empathy is and why it's important, can anyone, can you guys see my screen by any chance?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Now that we've sort of discussed, before we kind of jump into activity one, we've had a bit of a chat about what empathy is and why it's important. Can any of you guys resonate, or do you have any examples in your professional life or personal life where you've used empathy, or you've seen empathy demonstrated where it's helped you navigate through something, or anything that we showed or went through sort of spark any memories in either a personal or work context?
Hey there, not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah.
I thought a really great insight from the video and then your jumping into empathy generally was the sort of automatic reaction to try and jump to a solution when someone's looking to be heard initially. And maybe I think that's just a really human thing. And sometimes taking the time to like absorb it first and actively listen in the first instance gives everyone more room to think constructively about what can be done, rather than jumping to a need to solve other people's problems then and there.
One that's really insightful. Thanks so much, Jack. And a bit of a warning, Jack was brave enough to jump on, but you know, the next round when I ask, I might just pick at random. So jump in or be summoned. But thank you so much for your insights. So we're going to jump into the activities. And one thing I may have not mentioned yesterday, just in case I didn't, the recordings of the links will be held here, but there's also some of the resources that I talk about and also extra links available that we've popped in your mural boards for you. So feel free to consult them at any time. And if there's anything in the slides that I've covered that you want to refer back to, we'll also put a PDF of the slides in your boards too at the end of every session, just for your reference. So the first activity we have that we're going to work on today is stakeholder and systems mapping. And so this is important to understand who, at very first, if you're going to go out and talk to a bunch of people and embark on this discovery phase of being empathetic and trying to interview and explore your challenges, is we need to understand who it is that you're going to be speaking to. So in your team, create a mind map on the main themes and sub themes that you can think of. So in your spaces here, start to map all the different systems and processes that you think your stakeholders are involved in, or how they're going to be affected by your challenge. So I guess a good way to start thinking about this is, one, who are your stakeholders, and start to sort of map them down here. Then start to think about what are some of the systems and processes that these stakeholders have to face or are affected by in the context of your challenge. So some questions you could ask yourselves are, in relation to your challenge, who is feeling the pain? Is it because they are part of a system that is broken? And if so, who is motivated to solve this? And what are the processes that these people interact with? And finally, how is it all connected? Obviously, these are all very loaded questions. You don't have to answer all of them, but they're simply just prompts for you to think about your stakeholders and how they are placed in the systems in the context of your challenges. I'm going to pause there because I've spoken a lot. Does anyone have any questions, or is everything clear so far? Forgive me if I'm going to say this wrong, but yes, Muhajisa?
I just want to, I don't have any question, but I just want to mention that I have an issue with the mirror that I had yesterday as well. So can we discuss as a team, and then one person can write it down, those kind of stuff, because I really have an issue with that, with the mirror.
Oh, no worries. We'll try and get someone to connect with you to figure out what's wrong with your mirror. But yeah, totally. In your teams, I don't think there's an ability to share screens, unfortunately, with the Zooms that we have. But yeah, totally. If one person wants to scribe while the rest brainstorm, that's completely okay. However you want to navigate the work, it's completely okay. But we'll try and get that fixed for you. Anyone else have any questions? Okay. We're going to send you off into your breakout groups. If you have any questions or any concerns at all, feel free to just pop it in the chat, and I or someone else will come over and give you guys a hand. But essentially, it's trying to understand the systems and the stakeholders that are relevant to your challenge.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone. I'll just wait a couple of moments before we jump back in. I hope you guys enjoyed sort of starting to flesh out the complexities of your challenges and how things are all sort of connected. I know I was sitting in one group and we're just kind of revving up before it was time to come back. So do not fret. As I said yesterday, this is a sort of live document and live discussion, and the team charters that you guys had developed yesterday should help sort of make you guys get some regular cadence into how you guys will interact and sort of flesh out these activities a bit deeper outside of these workshops. So we've had a think about stakeholders and sort of the systems at play and how they may be interconnected. But to the point, in order to conduct a discovery phase and discovery research, we need to understand sort of which stakeholders are going to be involved or part of our systems that we're addressing, and why, and sort of what are we going to ask them. So one thing that I do want to stress is I've spoken a lot about user research and user interviews today, but one thing I want to stress is that interviewing is not the only data collection method that you guys will be doing during the discovery phase. So please don't be misled by me talking about user interviews a lot throughout this discovery phase between now and over the next 2 weeks. Please feel free to do desktop research, book research, sort of that desktop scanning and research in conjunction with your interviews to really start to solidify your insights and get a more robust and holistic understanding. It is not just simply going out and engaging with your stakeholders, even though that is a big part of the process. We also do encourage, and as you would in any other discovery phase, it's sort of a holistic approach to gathering your data, because people is a source, but there are multiple. During this phase, you should be getting data from as many and multiple sources as possible to try and inform your insights. So to dig in a bit deeper into how to effectively run a discovery phase and what you guys will be doing over the next I don't know what happened there, the next couple of weeks as between now and workshop 3 is we're going to spend some time today, and I might give you guys a bit more time than 20 minutes to really flesh out and reflect on your research plan. So this research plan will inform just how you're going to go about the next 2 weeks between now and workshop 3 in going out and gathering your information and conducting those user interviews with your stakeholders. So when you'll see in activity 2 here, we have a grid. And in this grid, it's going to help you sort of flesh out who it is that you need to address. And please feel free to go bold. In previous Smart Seeds programs, we've had people email mayors, we've had people trying to book meetings with ministers, we've had people go out and interview a bunch of people off the street. We've had people sort of, the sky's the limit in terms of how you access people and who you access. So please don't be afraid to go bold. So the first thing you guys are going to sort of flesh out as a group is, who are you going to interview? How are you going to engage them? Is it going to be digitally? Are you going to phone call them? Is it going to be a face-to-face interview? Is it going to be a Skype call, a Zoom call? What information do you need, or do you think you need from this particular stakeholder? What kind of questions are they going to help you solve? Why are you engaging them in the first place? When are you going to do this interview? So you guys have only got 2 weeks between now and workshop 3. When are you guys going to do this? And this is imperative for you guys to start thinking of the scheduling process, because naturally these back and forth logistics can take a bit of time sometimes. And how long are these interviews going to be? A rule of thumb, I've put an hour or half an hour. Try to avoid the half an hours, because by the time you sort of get into a rhythm of interviewing and asking your questions, a half an hour is probably already gone by. My recommendation would be between 40 and 60 minutes, if you can, to try and have an in-depth conversation, for you to explore various topics that you want to ask, etc. And is there anything else that you need to know from this stakeholder? So you guys are going to spend some time sort of fleshing this research plan through, and this should really help you set up and create sort of a plan of attack between now and workshop 3 as to who are you going to engage, how are you going to engage them, what are some of the questions that you're going to ask, who's going to interview your stakeholders, because there are quite a few of you in each of these challenges. Who's going to do it? Is it one person that's going to interview all these people? Are you guys going to take turns? When are you going to engage it? And use this time to book it in if you need to. And like I said, how are you going to engage them? So we've left some space here because the grid doesn't say it, but the types of questions that you're going to ask, you can pop it in here, as well as the information that you're going to need from the stakeholder. But I'm going to give you 30 minutes in this time, and use this time wisely to really flesh this research plan out, and if possible, start to email people, contact people, get it in people's diaries to engage with them. And when you conduct these interviews too, I strongly recommend that it is not just one person that conducts these interviews. It can be a bit intimidating since there are groups of 4 to 6 people per team. If you have 6 people to 1 person in an interview, it might feel like a bit of a gang up, but the rule of thumb is generally 1 person to interview and the other person to capture notes or record the session. Remember to get consent, and 1 person asking a question. So yeah, generally in 2s it works quite well. 1, it becomes a bit too difficult. You're trying to listen in and be empathetic and ask questions and jot notes at the same time. It kind of can be a bit chaotic. But before we break off into breakout groups and you guys start to flesh out what your research plan will look like, does anyone have any questions?
Hey Radhika, I have a quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
Are we expected to conduct these interviews within the next 2 weeks, or to just plan the schedule and then I'll like contact the stakeholders and hopefully get a response in the next 2 weeks and then start doing the interviews?
It's expected that you go out and engage in the research over these next 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is why we're giving you guys this time, this half an hour to really flesh it out. And that, of course, things that don't get done within this session, you guys can regroup post and the subsequent days after to kind of deliberate and discuss. But yeah, the expectation is that you go out and actually conduct this research, and we're going to spend some time in your, sorry, I'll touch on this, but as part of your homework as well, there's an opportunity for you guys to practice practice your interview questions that you're going to ask and get help from your mentors and stuff like that.
Okay,
but
cool.
I would strongly suggest once you guys have come up with a research plan, and if you get time to as well in this half an hour to nut out some of the questions that you're going to ask them, use this 2 weeks to connect with your mentors, to validate it. I'm also here if you guys want to shoot me an email, that's completely okay too. But yeah, this is where you can definitely leverage your mentor networks to kind of validate or challenge some of the questions that you might have.
Sounds good. Thank you.
No worries. Does anyone else have any questions? I'm going to take silence as a no. So if there are no more questions, we're going to break out into your breakout groups. I would strongly suggest working through the grid, and then start to have a think of, and then secondary to that, once you've filled that out, then start to think about the questions that you're going to ask these stakeholders. It's probably the best way of attack. Yay. Woohoo! Well, it's Friday and we have 15 minutes left. And for those who just joined, I just wanted to give you guys a big congratulations. Even though we're 2 workshops in, the level of collaboration, even in a virtual room, is very, very impressive. So well done to each and every one of you. So I thought I might delve into what our homework is, I mean, not my homework, but what your homework is going to be for the next 2 weeks, just to make sure everything is crystal clear, and use these 15 minutes to allay any concerns or questions that you guys might have. So as you guys all are well aware, we were using these research plans for you guys to really start to flesh out who are your stakeholders that you're going to go and interview, what do you need to know from them, how long are your interviews going to be? As I said, recommended between 40 minutes to an hour. Who's going to be in the room to interview? Who's going to be documenting? When are these going to take place? Who's going to schedule them in? When do you need to get them RSVP'd by? Really starting to get you guys to solidify your logistics, because 2 weeks when you have to conduct interviews is going to go by just like that. So my biggest recommendation is to, if not today, over the next subsequent early next week, if you haven't sort of started to solidify your research plan, definitely get together and nut that out so that you can go out and contact stakeholders and start to pencil in those sessions if you haven't already. But on the note of running an interview, and this is part of the homework piece to kind of get you guys warmed up and ready for workshop 3. And I'll kind of go into what's expected between now and workshop 3, and what we're going to do in workshop 3, and why it's important that you have what's required in terms of outputs, so you can come into workshop 3 really roaring and ready to go. So as part of your homework, now you've started to flesh out, right? Like your research plan, start to schedule them in. Now comes the hard part of actually interviewing in person, which if you've never done one before, for me personally, when I started my job as a UX researcher, I found it very, very daunting. I kind of dodged trying to interview for many, many months until my director just pushed me there and was like, just go do it. And I was like, hi, okay. So some things that helped me were, and I've popped this video here, this woman explains sort of the process really, really well. But as to talk you guys through it, using this as a guide, I highly recommend if you're going 40 minutes to an hour to come up collectively with no more, although no less than 10 questions, but sort of have some key 5 or 6 that you want to ask, and then come up with 10 so that, oh, wonderful. I conducted a number for your thesis, Isaac. I expect incredible outcomes from you then, no pressure. No more than sort of 10 questions as a baseline, just so you have enough to go with when you're in your interview. These questions will be the framework of your conversation, but please don't feel like it's set in stone that you have to ask question 1, then question 2, then question 3. Naturally, as the conversations unfold, you might find that the participant alludes to something that's more relevant to your third question as opposed to your second question. So don't be afraid to ask your questions out of order. But between now and when you guys are starting to think about the questions that you're going to ask, which realistically will be done between now and early next week, so you can start to interview, it's a good time to interview your challenge champions, get some time with them or your mentors to really test out your questions. Of course, I'm here and Kay is here too to use as a sounding board, but I would strongly recommend that you reach out to your mentors or your challenge champions to sort of test your thinking and your questions. And some prompts to asking your questions are ask open-ended questions. So these are questions that don't have a yes, no response, like, do you like your job? Someone could either go yes or no. I think a more open-asked question would be, what aspects of your job do you particularly enjoy most? And then once you answer that, can you explain to me why? Or could you give me an example of those? Those sort of probing questions. If someone isn't giving you a very enriched answer, you can ask those sort of probing questions to kind of get to dig deeper. Because sometimes it could be to a myriad of reasons. They're not used to being interviewed before, or they're just uncomfortable or nervous. We just tend to give the first thing as a response that comes to us to answer the question. And you kind of almost allay some of those concerns of the interviewee by asking those questions and making them feel comfortable and kind of probing deeper. Don't be afraid to dig deeper. As I said, why? Could you provide an example? Could you please elaborate by? Don't be afraid of asking emotional questions. So how does that make you feel, or how did that experience make you feel? It can help you get invaluable insight of how that person experienced the situation they're trying to explain to you, or give context to the questions that you're asking. And as I've mentioned, tips for success, it's okay if you don't ask it in the order you originally intended, and 2 people per interview, and avoid leading questions. So after you've done a couple, as I mentioned, you start to subconsciously percolate some themes in your head. And sometimes without even realizing, you want to jump to ask a question because you've done 7 interviews before and 7 other people have said the same thing. So you want to test if the 8th person's going to say the same thing. You have to hold off and just really treat each interview as if it's your very first interview and assume absolutely nothing. So at the bottom of this, the bottom of your workshop 2 section here, you'll see some tips for empathy interviewing that we've put up, some ways that you can build rapport with your interviewee, and some example questions that we popped in here. I'll let you guys review this kind of in your own time, but to kind of set the scene and kind of why we're pushing you guys to really interview and engage with people between now and workshop 3 is, let me kind of zoom into kind of workshop 3. So we've given you guys some space here. How you want to collate your data when you go and interview these people is completely up to you, whether you want to have a shared set of Google Docs. I personally, if I were you guys, or I guess in a way that's worked really well for me, is I've had a series of Excel tabs, and it's a bit annoying, but you have each paragraph or series of sentences as an Excel cell, and then you can kind of theme it accordingly. So when you want to search for the theme of vulnerability or homelessness, you can kind of select that theme, and only those quotes that have come that are relevant to the theme of homelessness pop up. But entirely up to you how you choose to organize your data. You might just want to capture everything in a Microsoft Documents page, or you might want to just capture everything here. Completely up to you. You have creative reign as to which form of synthesis you wish, but however you capture it, you have to your final notes and your synthesis has to be copied into this board here. We've left some space here in the bottom. So however you want to capture, whether you want to directly chuck it onto Mural while you're interviewing them or copy them over, that's entirely up to you. But you need to put it on the board so you have that data with you in the session. And that's important because in workshop 3, the first thing we're going to do is get you to cluster and theme your data. So don't worry about organizing your data or trying to create themes or insights just yet. We are not at that stage yet. The only expectation between now and workshop 3 is that you have your data from your desktop research and engaging with your stakeholders. That is it. And then from that, we're going to embark on the process of clustering and theming and developing insights and etc. in the next workshop. So I just want to make that very clear that it's just simply, we're simply in the data gathering phase right now. And it's a mix of you conducting desktop research, so whether that be reading articles, looking up things online, reading newspapers, consulting books, and engaging with people and stakeholders. We have 7 minutes left. I'm going to pause there. Does anyone have any questions or anything they want to ask before we wrap up, or any questions about the homework tasks that you guys have?
I had a question. Are we all right to take video interviews?
You guys are, provided that you have consent of the interviewee.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
That's a really awesome question, Vinny, and it definitely helps to have recordings if possible, because sometimes you want to refer back to them, or if not, like you might want to share with other of your team members because you conducted it, but some other people might want to watch it. Just some interviewing hygiene things. We've put a few tips in there, such as have 2 people, if possible, be in an interview, because sometimes somebody's more focused on note taking and the other person can be more focused on the interviewee, because sometimes if you're trying to note take, there is a little bit of a disconnect, or you kind of stop hearing what the person's saying because you're still note taking on what they've just said. With your challenge champion, however, definitely, if you haven't put them in your research plan, please set a time to put them in your research plan, because they will definitely be so helpful in just kind of showing you all the things that they've encountered or they've experienced, and that's going to create a lot of thought bubbles for you guys to start from, as well as kind of leveraging on their connections to say, you know, if they're going on a particular point in terms of, you know, stakeholder inclusion experiences, you can ask the question of, is there anyone in mind that we should reach out to? And then you've got like a very specific contact that they might go, oh yeah, you know, I know somebody, I'll put you in touch with them. Whereas if you don't ask, you don't get. Also in terms of interviewing hygiene, as you start the interview, just be a little bit kind of purposeful at the very beginning to say, we're just taking this survey or this interview with you to understand your thoughts. There's no right or wrong answers. Kind of help them put at ease, and there will be no identifiable kind of data that comes back to you. So we're not trying to say, you know, Vinny said this or Catherine said this. We're just wanting to find out what people's like thoughts and opinions are. And of course, if they consent to recording their video, you can hit record on that. Are there any other, oh, sorry, one more thing is because you are all taking part of this project as almost like a part of you at your organization. Sometimes someone might go, is this for GHD? Is this for Stockland? Are you using this information because you work at Orange City Council? So what you can say there is this project, like any information collected through this project, isn't going back to be used on anything specific for any program or project work at your respective organizations. That's not the purpose of this project. It is purely to understand and find out more so that it will help you with developing a solution on this big challenge. If anyone comes up with any curly questions, I have had somebody sit me down in an office and kind of really question why I was asking them about the future, like what they thought about the suburb they lived in, because they thought it might be used for developers and they didn't like that. So just be mindful, especially when you're touching on some really, it might be controversial or kind of heartful subjects that some people might have, you know, preconceptions about why you're taking the data. Thanks, Reds.
Thanks so much, Kay. And to that point, we have a great comment here that flows onto that. So feel free to explain to them about how I'll be using the information and the context of which this information will be used, so the participant understands consent. You can say, you know, you're going through a particular design challenge and it's used purely for that, agnostic of your organization, exactly what Kay said, and that, you know, all data is de-identified. So you might want to capture the data and have that person's name in it for the purposes of your, when you're collecting it in person, live, but I strongly suggest that you de-identify all data as soon as possible, and kind of like categorize your data in a way so it's like interviewee 1, interviewee 2, interviewee 3, just as a good like sort of sanitary interviewing practice. And to answer your question, Crystal, of how do we reach out to our mentors, their email addresses are on the black banners of your mural board. If not, they will be in the next half hour. So don't worry about that. We will get that sorted for you.
Yes, I will update the boards. Sorry, guys.
In the final 2 minutes, does anyone have any concerns or anything they want to ask before we let you roam free to interview in the wild? Everything clear, everything makes sense, everyone understands what they need to do?
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, good luck with interviewing. It's personally my favorite part of the Double Diamond. I love hearing people's stories, so I hope you guys enjoy doing this in context of your challenges. Thank you so much for your time on a Friday. Enjoy the rest of your afternoons and weekends, and we'll see you back for workshop 3.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
so much,
Thank
everyone.
you so much, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.